Hello and welcome back. In today's video I thought I'd talk a little bit about modern action figure lines aimed at kids, and whether those lines are finding their intended audience or not. And I'll start by talking about Super Dinosaur. Super Dinosaur made his debut in June 2011 in a comic book published by Image Comics' Skybound imprint. The series was created by writer Robert Kirkman, the man behind The Walking Dead and Invincible, and artist Jason Howard, who had previously worked with Kirkman on the series The Astounding Wolfman. Both Kirkman and Howard wanted to create a comic that they could read with their children and enjoy together. Kirkman stated, "I want it to be a true all-ages book in that it's appropriate for kids young enough but still able to read, and it's still something my fan base will probably enjoy." Artist Howard said, "Super Dinosaur is a mashup of everything I found awesome as a kid. Dinosaurs, robots, adventures in hidden worlds, and big comic book action. All of it made contemporary through Robert's exciting writing and heartfelt characters." In the series, scientists Dr. Dynamo and Max Maximus discover a hole in the Earth that leads to Inner Earth, a place where dinosaurs live. In addition to dinosaurs, Inner Earth is home to Dinosaur, a valuable deposit of solar power contained in a rock. While conducting experiments there, Maximus genetically altered a Tyrannosaurus, with which he tried to take over the world. Dr. Dynamo and his son Derek stopped him and formed a team with the Super Dinosaur to protect Inner Earth from Maximus. When fighting supervillains, Super Dinosaur wears several types of mechanical harnesses that act as exoskeletons, which he operates with miniature control pads customized for his limited reach. The comic book series Super Dinosaur lasted 23 issues, ending in January 2015. The entire series has been collected into 4 trade paperback volumes, which are readily available, and a complete compendium of the series is scheduled to be published in July 2024. Super Dinosaur was then adapted into a computer-generated animated series produced by Spin Master Entertainment, Atomic Cartoons, and Skybound Entertainment. The show debuted on September 8, 2018 in Canada on Teletoon, and subsequently in the United States on the Amazon Prime streaming service on October 6, 2019. It has since been added to both Tubi and the Roku channel. This animated comedy adventure series lasted 1 season of 26 episodes, with Spin Master announcing a toy line derived from the series consisting of 7 figures. And you see 5 out of those 7 figures before you. There are 4 basic-sized figures in the Super Dinosaur toy line. Of course, there's Super Dinosaur himself, who has a turning head, articulated jaw, he's got shoulder and elbow articulation, and his legs can move slightly. And you can see his little T-Rex hands there with the joystick controls to operate the giant cybernetic arms. Like I said, this is made by Spin Masters, the same company that makes the Batman and DC figure line at 4-inch scale, and they also make the popular Paw Patrol figures. And this line kind of fits somewhere in between those. Super Dinosaur's kid partner is Derek Dynamo, Kid Genius, and I usually have him on a flight stand because he can stand on his little robot companion wheels. Their arch enemy is Max Maximus, the evil scientist that created Super Dinosaur to try to take over the world. He comes with a cybernetic arm that can be popped off and replaced with this alternate giant claw arm. And another dinosaur creation of Max Maximus, his servant Dreadosaurus, who is obviously an evolved Stegosaurus. The line also includes this giant Super Dinosaur, who stands about 8 inches tall, and he has a weapon attachment on his back, pretty much the same as the basic-sized 4-inch figure, just bigger. And in the basic series, there are also 2 variations of Super Dinosaur that I don't have. It's SD in Arctic gear and also in scuba gear. The Super Dinosaur toy line was sold at Toys R Us in Canada and supposedly on Amazon in the US, although I've never seen any of these toys for sale on Amazon. All the toys I have from this line I acquired through eBay, some through Canadian sellers. So my question to you is, how many of you have actually heard of Super Dinosaur? The comic, the TV series, or the toys? Did you know one aspect existed but not the others? It seems that Super Dinosaur had all the components in place to become a successful franchise like we saw in the 1980s and 90s. Comic book, animated series, toy line. And yet I barely see any mention of Super Dinosaur on social media, including YouTube, and the toys barely have a presence on auction site eBay. This got me thinking of other recent franchises aimed at kids in, say, the 7 to 12 year age range that don't seem to have achieved the popularity that franchises did during the golden age of action figures. For example, The Last Kids on Earth is a children's illustrated novel and subsequent book series by American author Max Brailer, illustrated by Douglas Holgate. Novels in the series have been recognized on bestseller lists of both the New York Times and USA Today. The series currently includes 9 books. The books follow a 13-year-old boy named Jack Sullivan, where he and his friends live in his foster brother's treehouse after a zombie and monster invasion hits his hometown of Wakefield, Massachusetts. Jack and his friends fight one monster in each book, while trying to stay alive and stop an entity named Rezok who wants to take over the Earth. An animated television series based on the books premiered on Netflix on September 17, 2019, with a 1-hour first season. A 10-episode second season premiered on April 17, 2020, and a third season was released on October 16, 2020. Jakks Pacific launched the toy line based on the series in early 2020, which included sets featuring all main characters battling zombies, 3 giant monster figures, a treehouse playset, and several role-play toys. The toys were sold in the US on Amazon, but I personally never saw these in brick-and-mortar stores. A successful young readers book series with kids battling zombies and kaiju, with an accompanying cartoon and a toy line. But yet again, I don't see much mention of The Last Kids on Earth when talking about modern franchises. Some time ago I did a video about one of the toys from a series called Alteration. In 2021, independent maker Pandamoni Toys released the first series of figures for the Alteration series, which follows the adventures of GK Delta, a group of humanoid animal hybrids, as they uncover the top secret Generation Chimera conspiracy while questioning their duty to a human society that fears them. There were 6 figures in the Alternation line, made available on Pandamoni's own website as well as on Amazon. The toys were supported by a series of animated webisodes that were released on Pandamoni's website as well as YouTube, and a series of comics made available both digitally and in print. In 2021, a Kickstarter for a second series of Alternation figures failed to fund, and there have been no other releases since. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention my old friends Final Faction. I've done 3 videos on this Dollar Tree toy line, which combined have nearly 40,000 views, so I know people had an interest in this line. But after several waves of figures, it appears that even this inexpensive, readily accessible line is probably done. Final Faction released 3 animated webisodes to YouTube in support of the series, as well as the first issue of a comic book, which I thought was quite enjoyable. Back in July of 2022, the creators of Final Faction put out a plea to the fandom to spread the word about the comic book. Sales were particularly slow, and it seemed that a second issue would not come to pass because of low sales on the first issue. And since a second issue never appeared, that seems to have been the case. The last new product announcement to come out of Final Faction was back in August of 2022, with the announcement of the Elite and Venom repaint series, which were released later that year. Unfortunately, no new toys have been previewed or released since that time. The Final Faction team was quite active on social media, staying connected with the fans. But looking at their Instagram account, the last post from them was in June 2023, in which they were still showcasing the repaint line that was released nearly 6 months earlier. I know there are those of you who have said, but Final Faction announced other things were coming. Yes, they did, and I'm not a pessimist, but I am a realist. After no new product announcements for over a year, and no social media activity for more than 6 months, I'm pretty confident in saying that this line is probably done. And that's a shame because for the price point of $1.25, this was a very well put together toy line, and a very ambitious project from Dollar Tree. There are other examples I could go through of toy lines aimed at kids that seem to have come and gone without much fanfare. From retail lines like McFarlane's Raw 10 and the BAM series from Jax, to independent lines like I Am Elemental, a series of action figures aimed at empowering young girls. I've also covered toy lines from Leonard and Chat May that are interesting and affordable, but the presence of those toys, at least in the US, is confined to discount stores like Family Dollar and Job Lot, with limited selection and availability. So the question is, why have none of these lines lasted longer, or had the widespread popularity that franchises of the 80s and 90s enjoyed? It is a multifaceted question, and personally I think the biggest answer is the lack of synchronicity that we had during the golden age of action figures. One selling tool that was popular in the 80s were comics. Monthly comic sales have been diminishing for decades, and have become a highly specialized sales market relegated mostly to comic book shops. That, coupled with the current cover prices that average $4 per issue, make most comics inaccessible to the average kid looking to spend his allowance after school. The days of being able to browse spinner racks filled with inexpensive comics are long gone. So using comic books as part of a multi-pronged marketing strategy aimed at kids is probably no longer effective. As stated earlier, the Final Faction comic, which was available alongside the action figures for just $1.25, could not achieve sufficient sales to justify even a second issue. Also, back when I was a kid, television cartoons were appointment viewing on Saturday mornings or after school. There were a limited number of networks, all readily available to watch right over the air, and widespread home media was in its infancy. If you created a cartoon based on a toy line, chances are it would get a decent viewership. Over time, viewing habits have changed drastically. Today, cartoon blocks on the major networks are a thing of the past. Since the 90s, we've transitioned from cable networks and home media to streaming services, with more entertainment choices than ever before. Not to mention the rise of video game culture. Getting kids to become aware of your animated show, never mind watch it, is a huge challenge. Like comics, the effectiveness of using television as a marketing tool, especially for new IPs, has greatly diminished. With cartoons now being shown on different streaming services, you would have to count on your intended viewers actually subscribing to your streaming service, as well as scrolling through the options to find that the show even exists. Also, with many of the streaming services being ad-free, the use of commercials to advertise the toys, as was done prominently during the cartoon showings of the 80s and 90s, is no longer an option. So even if your intended audience was watching your show, how would they be aware that there were actually tie-in toys to go with it? Well, way back when, we were able to go into a toy store, like Toys R Us, Child World, and KB Toys. These stores were always a treasure trove of new properties that we would never have discovered without those toy stores stocking them. As we know, those specialized toy stores, at least in the US, are pretty much gone, with a bulk of kids' toy sales happening at Walmart, Target, and Amazon. With the action figure aisle and the big two brick-and-mortar retailers steadily shrinking, it's tough to get your product into that coveted space, especially when it's a new IP, and those spaces are pretty much monopolized by long-running franchises like Transformers, Star Wars, and Jurassic Park. With Amazon and other online e-tailers, how would anyone become aware of what new IPs they carry? You would have to come across it by chance, in a search, or have become aware of it through social media. Even then, your social media awareness of a product would be dependent on your activity and who or what you follow or subscribe to. As I pointed out in several of the cases I looked at, some of them were only available through Amazon or specific retailers or websites. How many kids today surf Amazon or social media platforms looking for new properties? Seeing something in a store and saying, "That's cool, I want that," doesn't seem to happen with the frequency that it used to because of the limited choices available in the big physical retailers. So what kids' toy lines are doing well? Properties based on video games seem to have success, like Halo, Minecraft, and especially Fortnite. The 4-inch Fortnite line from Jazzwares especially seems to produce a nice selection of figures and vehicles at an affordable price. If you leave the action figure section and head over a few aisles to the preschool section, properties like Paw Patrol from Spin Masters and the Imaginext series offer great full lines for younger kids that include figures, vehicles, and massive playsets. I've seen a lot of criticism lately of the big toy companies aiming their toy lines too much toward adults, yet there are various toy lines based on established properties that are geared toward kids, like the Motu line based on the Netflix series, Star Wars Mission Fleet, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem series, Transformers Cyberverse and Earthspark, Marvel's Mech Strike and Epic Heroes, and the Spin Masters Batman and DC lines that have been successful for several years. These toy lines have had different levels of media support, including animated films and series, and have enjoyed various degrees of success. So after all that, the question remains, what is the future of action figure lines when it comes to school-age kids? Personally, I think action figures will always exist, but the market will keep diminishing over the years, just as it has with comic books. A good portion of action figure makers will still target adult audiences, either with nostalgia properties, like the Transformers Generations line, G.I. Joe Classified and Star Wars Black Series, along with newer properties, like Action Force and Delta 17. I think the big makers will still try to market action figures toward that 7 to 12 age kid range. But I think as we see now, more effort will be put into marketing those type of toys toward younger age kids, because I firmly believe that kids are growing out of toys faster than they used to, due to the growth of video games and other electronic distractions. So what do you guys think? I know there's a lot of opinions about this subject out there. Do you think there's a future for action figure lines marketed toward kids? Do you think the big toy companies are doing enough to attract that audience? And do you think there's even a way to do that in today's era of specialized streaming services and social media? To those of you that do have school-age kids in your family, have you attempted to introduce them to this hobby? And what was their reaction? I'd be curious to know. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.